In this lesson, we're going to work on actually the addition of fractions. As I'm sure most of you remember, that when you add two fractions, the denominators, the bottom parts, have to be the same. And if they are the same, here are the rules. Simply add the numerators, and then simplify, meaning reduce to lowest terms if possible. So if the denominators are already alike, you are in pretty good shape. Let's take a look at one. I have 39/14 and 3/14. You can leave the problem written horizontally, or you can write it vertically. That tends to be most people's preference. I have 39/14 plus 3/14. They already have a common denominator of 14, so I will keep the denominator of 14, and I will add 39 and 3, which will give me 42. All right, I have an answer of 42/14, which is the correct value, but 42 and 14 are both even numbers, so I can divide by 2. And that will give me 21/7. It becomes apparent to me now that 21 is divisible by 7. I might not have noticed that with 42/14, but 21 divided by 7 is the whole number 3. So this sum is the whole number 3. You only have to worry if the top is divisible by the bottom evenly, then go ahead and change it. Otherwise, leave it reduced to lowest terms. Let's look at another one. I have 17/18 plus another 17/18. I keep the denominator of 18, and I add 17 and 17, which is 34. All right. 34/18 is the answer, but perhaps not in the right form. These are both even. So if I divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2, 2 goes into 34, it will go 17 times. 2 goes into 18 9 times, and I cannot reduce anymore. Leaving it improper is fine, and I will have 17/9. So if I already have a common denominator, I simply add the tops, but then I am always tasked with the job of reducing if I can, or simplifying is what your book calls it. To add when denominators are different, find the least common multiple of the denominators. And that number is the least common denominator. So it was called the LCM, but now when we're dealing with our fractions, it's called the LCD. Multiply by 1 using the appropriate notation. I will show this a certain way, perhaps a little different than the book does. Add the numerators, keeping the same denominator, and simplify if possible. I'm going to write my problem vertically. This is 14/3 plus 5/6. The first thing I have to do is look at the numbers 3 and 6. Common denominator, least common multiple. Remember, our process is to go to the larger one and ask, will it work? Yes, 3 goes into 6 evenly, so 6 will work. All right, so common denominator of 6. This is where I write it a little differently than your book does, but what I do is say, what do you have to multiply 3 by to turn it into 6? The answer is 2. So do the same thing with the top. So you are really multiplying by 2/2, which is the number 1. So when you multiply by 1, you don't change a value. You're just changing the look. This has become 28/6 as opposed to 14/3. This fraction does not change, so it stays 5/6. Now I have my common denominator. I keep the denominator of 6. 28 and 5 is 33. I have done the addition, but I always have to check and see, can I simplify the answer? All right, these are both divisible by 3. So I will divide them both by 3. That will give me 11 on the top and 2 on the bottom. That is not equal to a whole number. That is the finished answer. So I found the least common multiple of 3 and 6, which was 6. I built the new fraction, added the tops, reduced. All right, let's look at another one. All right, I have 32 over 7 plus 13 over 14. To add fractions, I have to have a common denominator, and I am looking for the least common multiple of 7 and 14. I'm going to look to the larger number and say, will it work? Is 14 a multiple of 7? The answer is yes. So that becomes my least common multiple, which is my least common denominator. It's really nice when one of the denominators will work. Now, what was 7 multiplied by to turn it into 14? The answer is 2. So do the same thing to the top. 2 times 32 is 64. No change here, so no change here. The least common denominator is 14, so you keep it. You're going to add 64 and 13. 4 and 3 is 7. 6 and 1 is 7, so I have 77 over 14. Now, can I reduce that? Well, I have 77 over 14. I recognize that 7 is a factor there and 7 is a factor there. 7 goes into 77 11 times. 7 goes into 14 2 times. That does not represent a whole number. If it had been 12 over 2, I would have called it 6. But that is not the case. All right, let's look at number 5. I'm going to give myself a little more room. I have to find the least common multiple, the least common denominator for 12 and 15. 15 won't work, and I could start looking multiples, but I'm going to use the prime factor method. We talked about this just a few lessons ago. If I have 12 and 15, and I start dividing by primes, like 2. 2 goes into 12 6 times. It does not go into 15, so I bring it down. Will 2 go into either of them? Yes. 2 goes into 6 3 times, but it does not go into 15. 2 doesn't work anymore, but 3 does. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 15 5 times. The only prime number I have to use now is a 5. I bring down that 1, and 5 goes into 5 one time. Remember, all 1s tell me it's through. If I multiply these, 2 times 2 times 3 times 5, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 5 is 60. My least common denominator is 60. So I have 7 over 12 plus 2 over 15, and my common denominator is 60. All right, now I asked myself, what was 12 multiplied by to turn it into 60? How many times does 12 go into 60? The answer is 5. So then do the same thing at the top. 7 times 5 is 35. 15 into 60. You could divide. You will find out it goes in 4 times. And 4 times 2 is 8. So now I have my common denominator of 60. I add 35 and 8 for 43. And for the first time in this exercise, I cannot reduce that. So the sum is 43/60ths. Let's look at number 6. I have to find my common denominator for 4 and 6. This one I'm going to do method 1, which is to list multiples. So 6 times 1 is 6. 4 doesn't go into 6 evenly. 6 times 2 is 12, but 4 does go into 12. That's my least common multiple, or my common denominator. So I have 1/4 plus 1/6, and I have 12. 4 goes into 12 3 times, and 3 times 1 is 3. 6 goes into 12 2 times, and 2 times 1 is 2. Common denominator is 12. Add the numerators for 5/12. 5 and 12, that cannot be reduced. That's my answer. Let's look at number 7. You need to do a good bit of practice with these. All right, 50 is not going to work as a common denominator because 4 does not go into 50 evenly, but it might be a good bit of work to list the multiples of 150. So I think instead I will use my prime factorization method. So I have 50 and I have 4. Those are both even, so 2 is going to work. 2 goes into 50 25 times. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 still works. It doesn't go into 25, but it does go into 2 once. The only prime that will go into 25 is 5. Goes in there 5 times, bring down the 1. 1 more 5. We're done. And my least common denominator, my least common multiple is 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. 2 times 2 is 4. Times 5 is 20. 20 times 5 is 100. My common denominator is 100. So I have 3/50 plus 3/4, and my common denominator is 100. 50 goes into 100 2 times, so multiply the top by 2, and I get 6. 4 goes into 100 25 times, and 25 times 3 is 75. That got a little crowded. So I keep the denominator of 100. I add 6 and 75 for 81. There is no common factor between 81 and 100, so that is my answer, simplified, or sometimes called lowest terms. All right, we have a couple more. All right, number 8. Least common multiple. I think once again, I'm going to use the 27 and the 15 and try prime factors. My prime factors, remember, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, and so on. Well, 2 doesn't work in either one of those, but 3 does. 3 goes in there 9 times. 3 goes into 15 5 times. 3 still works. 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 goes into, it doesn't go into 5. Another 3, 1 and 5. The only prime number I can use now is 5. I'm done. The product of these is my least common multiple. 3 times 3 times 3 times 5. That gives me 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3, 9 times 3 is 27. And 27 times 5, I'm going to have to do that. That's 35. Carry the 3, 135. My least common multiple, my least common denominator is 135. So I have 7 27ths plus 7 15ths. I have 135. 27 goes into 135. All right, I'm going to have some workspace because I don't know. 27 into 135. Well, since this ends in a 5, I'm going to guess 5. 5 times 7 is 35. Carry the 3. Yes. And maybe I should have guessed it from over here. So 27 goes into 135 5 times. And 5 times 7 is 35. 15. Well, let's see. Let's do that one also. 15 into 135. Let's try 9. 9 times 5 is 45. Carry the 4. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 4 is 135. So I guess I was a pretty good guesser. 15 goes in there 9 times. 7 times 9 is 63. I am adding. I keep the denominator of 135. And I add 35 and 63. 5 and 3 is 8. 3 and 6 is 9. 98 over 135. And I can't reduce it. I'm showing all of my work on these problems. All right, this one looks like it may be the biggest challenge because I have to find a least common denominator for 27, 45, and 10. I am definitely using prime factors to do this. 2. It doesn't go into 27, it doesn't go into 45, but it goes into 10 5 times. 2 doesn't work anymore. Does 3 work? Yes, I know 3 goes in there. 3 goes into 27 9 times. 3 does go into 45. It goes in 15 times. It doesn't go into 5. 3 works again. 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 goes into 15 5 times. And bring down that 5. Another 3 goes in there 1. Bring down the 5. Bring down the 5. Divide by 5. I get all 1s, which means I'm done. The least common denominator, least common multiple, is 2 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 5, which looks like a pretty big number. Here's what I'm going to do to make my multiplication easier. I'm going to multiply 2 times 5 for 10. And then 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So this is 27 times 10, or 270. That was just my way of grouping those to make it a little easier. So I have 4 over 27 plus 2 over 45 plus 3 over 10, and the common denominator is 270. $27 goes into 270 10 times, and 10 times 4 is 40. 45 goes in there. Well, let's see. I think it goes in 6 times, and 6 times 2 is 12. 10 goes in there 27 times, and 27 times 3, I'm going to have to figure that out. Where will I work? 27 times 3, 21, carry the 2, 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 more is 81. There we go. So now I have an addition problem. My common denominator is 270, and I need to add 40, 12, and 81. Right in the ones. I have a 2 and a 1, which makes a 3. Then I have a 4 and 1 makes 5, and 5 and 8 makes 13. I have 133 over 270, and that cannot be simplified. That is my final answer. I know this problem involved bigger numbers, a little bit harder because there were 3 fractions, but it gave us an opportunity to practice finding that common denominator. Sometimes we did prime factors, and sometimes we did listing multiples. factors, prime factors. This one was listing multiples, and sometimes we had a common denominator. So remember, with addition, you have to have that least common multiple to get started.